All right, good morning. Today we're going to talk about common problems with a Type B air meter and how to take it apart and address some of the issues. The basic tools you will need for doing this, for taking apart and working on a Type B air meter, you will need a pipe wrench, which we use to grab the tower and twist off and break open. Sometimes I've also seen the rubber strapped oil filter wrenches also sometimes work in our grab. Sometimes you need a little more bite. The older and dirtier the meter is, the harder it is to release this tower. If you keep your meter clean, it's much easier to work on. We'll need assorted sizes of wrenches from 1/2 inch, 9/16, and 5/8 for the various fittings and assortment of nuts on the meter. Flathead screwdriver works well for releasing this needle valve and such. Sockets are also a very viable tool to take off petcocks and or nuts and stuff of that sort as needed. As well as your petroleum jelly and probably some paper towel. As you open these up, you will have some corrosion inside and some debris. I do recommend to obviously remove all foreign debris and everything from inside your tower and around the base plate and wipe it clean before you reassemble and continue using your air meter. So this here is our Type B air meter. Some of the common problems we will have will be leaks, whether it's in the tube or from the top. The best way to figure out where a leak is coming from is to pump it up, and we'll put pressure on the air meter. If at this point we can get the needle to stabilize and pressure is maintained, the leak is not in the chamber. Any leak we would have would be coming from the bottom of our air meter. If we have a leak coming from this point and we cannot hold pressure here, we'll have a leak coming from either our ring, our top ring, bleeder, needles, or anything above here. The best way I found to do this is to take this under pressure and soak it in a bucket of water and look for where your air bubbles come from. So with that being said, we're going to go into disassembling a Type B air meter and showing you how to fix some of these common problems. So we'll start by taking off our top ring and tower. Oh. There. So this right here is our tower. This is what holds all the pressure in our meter while we fill it up. The common leaks of this would be around the base or around the top. And those leaks would be caused by the O-ring we have here inside the base of the meter. This is what seals the bottom to the top plate of the air meter. If that's a leaky issue, these seals can be pulled out as there and replaced. Or the other one would be the same seal on the top around the ring, seals the top of my air meter, and it compresses between these. Either of these seals are easily replaced and can stop leaks from top or bottom of our tower. If our leak comes from our needle valve works by, when I press this down, it moves the needle up and down. A common leaky problem on that is inside. This gets removed by this 1/2 inch nut. The handle comes off, the nut comes off. And this right here acts as a fulcrum for our lever. And then inside here we have a small O-ring that seals this needle to the inside of this top plate. That needle, or that O-ring, also comes off and can be replaced. As I'm rebuilding these meters or working on these meters, once I replace that seal, Vaseline petroleum jelly is a very good lubricant in lubricating your air meter to go back together to make things run smoother. There's also your pump on here. Pumps can leak, pumps can run very shaky, they can be sticky and not pump as smooth as we want them to. So to remove that, a 1/2 inch wrench on the top, and we twist it out, and the pump will remove from the top of your base plate. Now the pump has many parts in and amongst itself. You can then grab the top and the base and separate the two, and that removes our plunger. And on the plunger you have a series of O-rings. This O-ring right here is the one that seals the pump and allows it to build pressure. The top one is just a bumper to stop it from banging on the top brass. This seal is also replaceable in available kits and just slides on and off, and again, when replaced, a small dab of petroleum jelly. Now, if you have a pump that when pushed likes to bounce back up and it returns to a vertical state, that is caused by the very bottom down here. If you remove this big nut, that comes off, and inside here is a plastic one-way valve. This allows the air to leave the pump, but when you draw the handle back up, it does not suck air out of the pump, allowing it to build pressure. These are also easily replaceable. So with our new one-way valve in there, we go ahead and reassemble the bottom of our pump. As stated before, while I'm reassembling the pump, I put a little bit of petroleum jelly around the base of the pump. That helps it slide better and lubricate, making for very smooth operation. So when I get to this point and the pump is reassembled and lubricated, I like to place my finger over the end. You should be able to pull it up freely due to that one-way valve, and I should be able to push it and feel the pressure on the pump. And when the finger is removed, the air comes out. That's how I know the pump has been rebuilt correctly and I'm able to build pressure using my pump. So moving on top of the base plate then, we also have our release valve, or bleeder valve, which inside our bleeder valve could be a leaky issue. That contains an O-ring as well. That O-ring also comes in the rebuild kit and can be replaced to help stop leaks out of our bleeder valve. That one just screws back on. If you do need to replace a gauge, they do sell new gauges if your gauge wears out or is broken, and that would just thread off and thread back in here. But when you do that, that has to be Teflon taped and or thread sealed, where other fittings we've had so far have not because of rubber gaskets. This one will have to be sealed. For one of the last things we have on our base plate, there is a little brass fitting down here. If we remove the top part of that nut using our same 1/2-inch wrench, inside here at the base is another O-ring. This here is the O-ring that my needle seats on and stops and holds the pressure into the chamber. So when the lever is pushed, this needle rises, allowing my air pressure to go through here down into my pot. That is another point of leaking. If this needle gets corrosion or buildup on it, or this gasket wears out or dries out, it will not create a seal. So we can clean the end of our needle, and we can also replace our gasket as needed. This one also returns back on, and just tighten, but do not over tighten. We don't want to crush that washer on there. We just want to snug up against it. So those are the basic working parts of our air meter. To then begin reassembling, I'm going to use the tower. I do not need thread tape or any kind of sealant on the base of this tower. As again stated, it presses against this rubber O-ring. So I'm again going to thread this in and return it to a snug position, but do not over tighten. The tower will seat against the ring. I don't know if you can see inside there. But down at the bottom of this tower, there's the red O-ring. If I over tighten this, that O-ring will actually wrinkle and disform and not do its job. So I want to make this one snug, but not over tightened. So with my tower on and snug, I am going to return my needle into my top base. Again, applying a lubricant. I've found petroleum jelly and white lithium grease are both great for this. On this needle, this one here has a spring on it and a fixed ring. Some of them do have adjustable nuts here, and you can thread it up and down, and that'll set the depth of your spring, and you'll have to adjust that as you go to make sure we don't over tighten the spring. And by over tightening, I mean sometimes we can turn that nut too tight, and when we put the needle back in, it won't actually go down and seat in the bottom because that nut has pulled it up too far. So we have to just loosen that a little bit and we can get that. So while placing the top back on with my needle in, I have to make sure my needle seats into the center ring that we double checked and made before. So as I go to reassemble, I have put my needle in and I have made sure everything is lubricated and put in there. I'm going to replace the upper O-ring that helps seal the top of the tower to the actual tower. And this just stretches around. And this has a little seat on the actual top ring where the O-ring will sit. So once my O-ring is on there and seated flush, I can then reinsert the top, making sure my needle goes into the bottom brass fitting, and I twist it into place. Again, I'm not over tightening, I'm just bringing it to snug. So now at this point, I have my top is snug, my base is snug. I personally like to line up my gauge so it is perpendicular to my valves, my petcocks. So at this point, I just grab it and give it that last little snug down, making sure I am perpendicular and good to my base plate. Now I will return the pump into its position as well. There is another ring here. This O-ring here seats the top of this pump to the top of the air meter. It sits on this lip right here and gets pressed in between, allowing the pump to not leak air out when pressurized. So we will go ahead and put our pump back into its place. Now I've noticed when I go to tighten the pump, because of that O-ring, sometimes when you put the wrench on here, I have to actually push down as I twist to get it to grab. But once it grabs, it walks itself right into place. Again, we will tighten to snug without over tightening or super wrenching on it. It just needs to seat that O-ring and we'll be good. So there we are. That is returned to snug. Now to put our release lever back together, it works as a fulcrum and lever. The brass ring goes down as your fulcrum, and our lever gets placed on top of that. On top of everything goes our locking nut. I like to get that started just a little bit. And then what I like to do is pump up my air meter to make sure I have pressure on it. And before I test anything, I pump it to a known number or any number, and I'm just going to let it sit for a moment to make sure I don't have any leaks and that I'm able to hold pressure. And we have a stable gauge. So now that I've noticed my needle has stabilized and good, I'm going to go ahead and tighten down my release valve. I can put a screwdriver on there and it holds the valve in place as I tighten the nut. With this, I do not want to over tighten the nut. Again, the same aspect as below. If I over tighten, I will actually draw that needle up and it will release all the air out of the chamber. So I tighten until I hear that release. That's telling me I've gone too far. Now I back it off like a quarter turn and I should have a little bit of wiggle in my handle. If this handle is clamped down too tightly, I have too much pressure on this nut and my meter will cause a leak. So with everything reinstalled, I pump back up to my previous initial pressure. And I bleed it off to what I need, and I let it sit to make sure I don't have any leaks. So there, I've completely redone the top half of this meter. From this point up to the top, this meter now has no leaks. The pump is well lubricated, everything is in working order. So, with the top being rebuilt, if I'm still having issues when I release my air valve on an air test and I still have leaks, more than likely the leak is coming from the bottom of this tower down. And that would be caused by either a leaky petcock or on the bottom, the big O-ring that seals to the top of your pot. Either of those can be an issue. This O-ring here, with the screwdriver, I can pop out and remove. They make a new one that you press in, and you get it in as best you can. When the new one is on there, I find it best to then mount your top on your pot and use your clamps, and you can work it down slowly and use the air pot to press that ring into place. Your petcocks are just a 5/8 inch wrench. They turn out, they're just threaded in. And then these, when replaced, will have to be pipe doped and or thread taped to prevent leakage and seal those threads up. And that is how you rebuild a Type B air meter.